feel when you got approached by Rehena about the walk?
Thank you so much. So yeah, when Rehena reached out to me, her vision chimed with everything I had been thinking. So I felt encouraged. I felt this was where Energy for Peace should be, and I felt I wanted to work with her. It's amazing to think that a year ago we had never
Mhm.
met. I just find that quite extraordinary. I should perhaps first just say what a Quaker is. There may be people here who don't know or never heard of us. We're a very small group. Quaker is sort of shorthand for the Religious Society of Friends. Quakerism began in 17th century England and is firmly rooted in Christianity. However, we also recognize the truth with a capital T from whatever quarter it may come. So, interfaith and multi faith, respect and cooperation have always been part of being a Quaker. We call ourselves Friends with a capital F. So, Quakers are contemplative. We worship mostly in small groups based on silence, with occasional spoken contributions that we call ministry. And Quakers are committed to living our faith in the world, and in Christian terms, are one of the historic peace churches. So I work for Quakers as the first point of contact for other faith groups and churches. And Quakers, as a faith group, are committed to peace and justice. And we have a faith in action team in our peace department. So, right from the beginning, I looped in my colleague, Joe Holtaway, to work with Rehena and me on the practicalities of organising a public something in central London, which I'd never done before. So, how did I feel? Like most people, I'd been really horrified by the attacks of the 7th of October. I was horrified by the response from the Israeli military, the deaths and the destruction. I'd also been horrified by the war in Ukraine, the deaths, the destruction, and equally appalled at the wars in Sudan, Yemen, and the DRC, to name but a few. So when Rehena told me that her vision was to walk for peace and against all wars, not just the war in Gaza, which had so much media attention, again, it chimed with me. I'd been praying that there must be another way, that war is a failure and does not solve anything. Beyond hand wringing and conventional demonstrations, what could we do? Could there not be something positive? I'd been to the beautiful vigil service in St. James's Church, Piccadilly. This was after the bombs started to fall on Gaza. It was packed out and it was attended also by Muslim and Jewish people as well as Christians. And I felt that we needed to build on that multi faith desire to be together in profound grief and call for peace together. So when Rehena from Plum Village reached out to Quakers as another contemplative faith tradition, also committed to peace, again it chimed with my own thoughts, and I immediately said yes. At that time, and also to some extent today, words were so very hard to find. One group would be deeply offended by whichever words we chose to say to express a desire for the appalling killing to stop. So the idea of a silent action appealed very much. Even when people were trying to be very careful with words, they seemed to trip everybody up, and it was easy to say the wrong thing and be seen as taking sides. So to have a silent action felt really positive. Making our event multi faith was very important right from the start. We know that all religions have at their core the desire for peace, and hope that if we invited people to co-create this event, that they would join us. So not join us when we've already done it all, but to co-create it, to have meetings together. So we held online meetings for people from other faiths to join in. And it was essential to have Muslim and Jewish people from the beginning, which we managed to do, largely due to Rehena. And that's when I first met Julie, which was wonderful. Whilst the event that we ended up with matched closely the vision that Rehena had first shared with me, some details were very much co-created by the group. No religion has a monopoly of working for peace, and there are prayers and words of wisdom from each on the subject of peace. So asking each faith representative to share a prayer for peace encouraged each to attend. Rehena will have to tell me in the end, I think we had 11 different faiths came. Sometimes faith representatives are asked to sign up to something that already has been drafted by other people, or they're expected to work together quite quickly to come up with something that everybody can be happy with, but that's really, really difficult. So by asking them to share from their own traditions a prayer for peace or words of wisdom for peace, I think that was partly why people wanted to join us and did so. So again, one of Rehena's genius ideas. As we worked together, I felt more energized and excited. I've never worked on anything before where everybody immediately said yes, and things all sort of fell into place quite well. There was lots of work. Rehena did the hard graft of talking to Trafalgar Square authorities and the police and all that sort of thing. But other people then joined in, and quickly we had stewards, we had sound people, we had publicity people, we had people willing to be first aiders, and then we started to get messages from people saying that they planned to come. Initially, when Rehena and I had started talking, we thought maybe 300 people would come to such a thing. In the end, we estimate we had 1,500. It was quite remarkable, and that in itself was empowering. Um, Julie helped a lot with the publicity, and Rehena was interviewed on the radio on the morning of the walk, and said it was open to people of all faiths and none. And some of the people who were interviewed by a newspaper said that they had heard that on the radio, and that's why they'd come. So that was really lovely. I think that's probably enough from me for that question. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Judith. I literally got goosebumps when you said the numbers of the participation. How powerful. Judith, I've got a question to you, and I'd like to ask, how did it resonate with your own practice of peace? As you mentioned also about Quakers, I would like to know a little bit more.
Thanks, Rehena. I found that also really moving, and it's just wonderful to hear you speak about all those feelings we had around the walks. Yes, so when Quakerism began in the 17th century, it was a radical movement within Christianity, which emphasized the inner light or that of God in every person. It said that everyone can have a direct experience of the divine. Everyone is equally precious, and each and every life is of equal value and should be protected. At that time, such a radical idea was seen as a threat. So Quakers wrote a letter to the king and to both houses of parliament, a peace testimony. This peace testimony still guides Quaker practice of peace today. Many other Christian churches and most religions, if not all, also work for peace, and Quakers do not claim to have a monopoly on peace, but it is something for which we're well known. So what's my own practice of peace? I've been part of a long Quaker tradition of quiet peace work, behind the scenes, as it were. Again, not only Quakers do this. We found that offering opportunities for deep listening, for dialogue, for long-term and slow and lengthy processes can lead to cessation of hostilities and to progress to find peaceful solutions. So this prize is so precious that it's worth all the time, the frustration, the going round and round in circles, and the expense. And it's a humble contribution, but one that has played its part, a tiny piece in the jigsaw that's peace building. So, like all of you here, so Quakers know that really deep, strong, lasting peace depends on human security. And that security does not come from having the best weapons, but from being rooted in justice, in appreciation of our interdependence, grounded in the well-being of everyone. We work against the causes of wars and conflicts, and particularly now, this includes the link with climate justice and sustainability in the global crisis. So sometimes countering the narrative that security comes through attacking other people involves non-violent direct action. So that's also part of our peace practice. Many Quakers are called to that, along with other Christians and people from other faiths too, of course, opposing arms fairs in particular, where weapons are sold for profit and perpetuate the violence and the horror. It can involve being willing to be arrested. At national level, Quaker peace practice includes activities such as making submissions to the government. The current one is to the year-long Strategic Defence Review, which has taken a lot of research and effort and energy. And then at international level, Quakers have two offices, one in Geneva and one in New York, where we have consultative status with the United Nations. This is the kind of work I talked about before, creating quiet spaces for dialogue, for deep listening, away from the spotlight, where people whose job it is to be the mouthpiece of their governments can actually listen to each other as human beings. We're often asked if we're neutral. We're not neutral. We are on the side of international humanitarian law. We're on the side of international agreements and standards. But we do try to hold a position of principled impartiality. So we show concern for all suffering, distinguished from overt support for any one side, no matter how tempting. We also support local peacemakers, as they are the ones who understand a conflict or violent situation better than an outsider ever can. You may know the model of intervention in violent situations, which looks like an hourglass like this. The pinch point in the middle is war. Opportunities are very, very limited. But here, before the conflict has escalated, the opportunities are wider. There's more things that can be done to prevent an escalation. And if all the resources are put in at that time, then you can avert the conflict. And that's what Quakers were trying to do in the border area between Ukraine and Russia before the Russian invasion. And similarly, after a war, opportunities again widen out and peace can be built. And that was the program in the former Yugoslavia after the war there, to work very much with local peace builders to help them to build peace again and peaceful relations in their communities when the fighting had stopped. And that's still going on. So the multi-faith silent peace walk resonated for me in many ways with this peace practice of being a Quaker and the work that I had done. It was silent. Quaker worship is based on silent waiting upon God. So to walk prayerfully in silence resonated perfectly with me. And I was able to go into that space that I go to in a Quaker meeting for worship, connecting with that power which is beyond us, whether people call it God, spirit, or oneness. And I felt a deep connection with Julie, who was walking next to me in the first walk, and with all the people of so many different faiths around us. We were raising the level of peace energy, I felt, in the capital as we went to the places of power, Downing Street, the Cenotaph, and so on. And we each wore a white flower, Rehena spoke about, that people had been asked to make and bring or had brought with them. And that felt very equal. We all had a white flower. And the people who offered prayers they were representatives. They weren't faith leaders. They were people. We were all people. Um, walk for just the walk. Each step was extraordinary. I'd never felt anything like it. The first walk was called Peace in Every Step, and I really felt each slow, deliberate step was creating peace in London. It was wonderful. I can't really describe it. It was quite a unique experience. And I think the people who fell silent as we walked past them, that was also very powerful. At first, people were sort of saying, "What are you? We don't know what you are," because we had no placards or banners, but we had little QR codes that could be given on a postcard, and people could then scan that and find out all about us and why we were being silent. And people said that they felt really connected and energized after the walk. So that also resonated with me. I'd just like to show you something. I don't know if you can see this very well. This is the flower that Rehena made at the end of the first walk. We asked everyone to exchange a flower with somebody near them. This has been on my mantelpiece ever since and is a daily reminder of the walk and that really profound sense of creating peace somewhere. So before I cry, I'm going to stop talking.
Thank you very much, Judith. How wonderful. The little flower, which has really big meaning and power, I want to say. What made you to participate the second time the walk? I think what I want to ask is, what do you think that the impact was, and you contributed to the walk second time as well?
Okay, thank you. So it must have been about 6 months after the 7th of October when we had vaguely thought of doing something in September, but then the suffering is about 6 months into the conflict in Gaza. The suffering of the children was so immense, and the number of people killed just unimaginable, and each life lost a tragedy. So it was all very acute, still is. So we were asked by someone working at Christian Aid whether we could organise a second walk, and it felt right to say yes. But originally, the idea had been that Rehena and I would organise a second walk, and that 3 large NGOs would support us. Hopefully, it would have been Christian Aid, Islamic Relief, and World Jewish Relief, but this didn't happen in the end. So it was us. And also, since the first walk, my communications department had had many, many requests from Quakers. When is there going to be another one? I didn't make it to the first one. I want to come on another one. So we had that going on as well. People wanted something positive to do, and so I guess it was from that. Levels of anger are very high. They were very high, and trying to channel that anger into something positive felt important. So I spoke just now about that power that I felt on the first walk, and I suppose it was hoping that the second walk would also feel like that and would again raise that energy for peace in the capital. Um, we decided the second time to pause more. On the first walk, we had paused outside Downing Street. The second time we paused in more places, at the cenotaph, at some of the memorials on Whitehall, and again at Downing Street. Um, and that was really powerful as well. And again, we wanted to remember the victims of all wars, all violent conflict, all kinds of military aggression. What I said about words still applies, whether you call something a war or a conflict or military aggression or bombardment, depending on which side you are. So it doesn't feel like a conflict if it's just one-sided, and it doesn't feel like a war if it's not armies, and it doesn't, yeah, it. So it's very difficult to find the words, but all those places we want 140, however you define them. So Sudan in particular, almost forgotten because of Ukraine and Gaza, but absolutely horrific what's happening in Sudan. And the DRC rumbling on for years and years. Yemen, Ukraine, as well as Gaza and the other wars. So again, remembering all the victims. So that's why we did it again. What was the impact? We've spoken a little bit about this. So Rehena was interviewed, I think it was called In Spirit, with Jumoke Fasciola on BBC Radio London on the morning of the first walk. Anyone who heard her will have been affected hearing her words. Some will have come on the walk, others didn't, but they heard it. Who knows what the impact is, what the ripples are? All the people who came on the walks will have felt something. For me personally, the that feeling was much greater on the first walk than the second. Um, that's just how it was for me, but I know other people felt it equally in both. And something about renewing a personal commitment for peace. If you bother to show up for something like that, and you've bothered to walk with people of other faiths around you, you've made friendships, hopefully, and you've experienced what that's like, then you go home and you feel energized and you have some recommitment. So I hope that that's an impact as well. I don't know how to measure that. I don't particularly want to measure it, but that's something that I hope is an impact. All the people Julie talked about, the people who saw the walks, that they will have been touched in some way. And I hope they are looking at the little films they took on their phones and thinking, oh, yes, I remember that. We had coverage on ITV News, in The Guardian, and in the religious press. Plum Village has all the prayers on their website, and on Quaker website, there's a link to Plum Village site for those prayers. There are short films from each walk, which are really beautiful and moving. And there have been the walks modelled on ours that have taken place in other cities, in Washington, Jerusalem, Los Angeles. I didn't know about Botswana. That's wonderful. And I hope that that will continue. And it shows that that people from all these different religions wish for peace, are prepared to work for peace and work together for peace. And so often the narrative that's in our media is that people from one faith community are attacking people from another faith community, and they use that as almost shorthand for people of difference. So to have people coming together from the different religions to walk for peace, to call for peace, I hope that our peace walk, the impact will counter some of that narrative.